So, we're in a ghost resort.
Yes. Can't you feel it? Can you see them?
Well, I can't see any. Well, I can see a couple of people here.
There are, for the first time in 15 years.
15 years?
Yes. Yeah, people have appeared.
Right. So we got Mickey Rourke. And who's the other guy we've got over there?
Gene Simmons.
From Kiss?
From Kiss.
Is that really Gene Simmons?
That is Gene Simmons from Kiss.
What's happened to him?
Well, that's just post-plastic surgery. So it's a shot of him in hospital recovering from a procedure. And him and his wife, his girlfriend, his partner, I'm not sure if they're married, but they did a reality show over in the States which was about them going through these procedures.
Right.
Yeah.
Probably his way of getting it paid for.
Yeah.
So you got these reconstructed faces and then a lot of architecture.
Yeah.
So what are the parallels that you're drawing there?
Well, it's about renovation.
Right.
In a way, so it's like you've got these faces which have been renovated and, enhanced or sort of like turned into, like the process I was seeing it like a sculptural sort of process which sort of relates back to, the sort of the sculptural aspect of architecture and, the relationship of the body to space.
Uh-huh.
And
do your buildings in some process of renovation? Like, are they an old, brutal, kind of architecture that's got something being done to it again? I mean, apart from what you're doing to it, you're obviously doing things to it as well. Like with these crazy paint drips that are coming down in this could be like an international style interior, I suppose.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
50s?
Probably more 60s, but actually parts of it are totally contemporary. So it's like it's a sort of expedient or sort of cost-effective bastardisation of international modernism.
Right.
But it's sort of like the revolutionary aspect of international modernism has now been diluted and it's become commonplace, it's become lifestyle. It's sort of like we're experiencing it in, sort of hotels and clubs and cheap developments and through, things like, Wallpaper magazine and, Vogue Living, etc. It's a real fashion kind of statement or a lifestyle choice, whereas before it used to be, it was a really sort of alien, revolutionary, sort of hard-looking thing.
And cold, I suppose.
Well, I guess it would have been seen to be that, I think, back...
But it's a very cinematic space too, that sort of open plan. You can imagine the camera panning across and showing various activities, and this is what this painting does to me. It's this widescreen, cinematic sort of image, and you kind of pan across it with your eyes and see... you go from warm to cool, you go from interior to exterior, light to shadow.
Yeah, I deliberately wanted all of those elements in play, but it's sort of like the activity has been removed, or like the evidence of habitation or any type of behaviour has.
Well, it's habitation. I mean, there's couches.
Yeah, of course, but
they put you in there, and taking the people out puts the viewer in.
Exactly. So they're like a stage set for the viewer and for the viewer's imagination. So that's why I have removed things like vases of flowers and fish bowls and like those sort of overt sort of like indicators of like a particular personality, if you like, or a particular group. It's sort of like these are much more open because of that. So, and in a way, it's like I've been doing that with my work for quite a long time, and that's been happening sort of quite intuitively, rather than it being a specific choice. Rather than it being some malevolent kind of like, I don't want any evidence of people in here or whatever.
Or watching another scene too. I mean, that's the big difference, isn't it? Whether you're in the picture, whether you're immersed in the picture completely, and it just sucks your field of vision, or whether you're watching something happening to other people and you're not part of it.
How do you mean?
Well, if there were people in there, if there were
I see.
other details of someone else's life, then you would be distanced from it as a viewer.
Well, yeah, that could happen, but some people might really feel engaged by that narrative aspect. But I'm not interested in sort of directing some narrative. You know, I'd much rather have it an open set for, you know, the viewer to enter it and generate their own narratives, or people are just reading it formally. You know, but I just felt like for a long time I sort of considered that if I had somebody sitting in a chair, for instance, or somebody about to walk around the corner or lying down on the shag pile carpet, it's then like immediately the readings are directed in a particular way.
Sure.
And
you can imagine all those things though having an open, can't you? You can see a dead body on the shag pile carpet.
Well, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, or doing something else. You know, it's like, you know, there's a lot of mirrored surfaces there. You know, like the painting's called Lost Weekend. You know, so it's suggestive of something kind of, you know, excessive or decadent or you know.
And you've gone from these slick surfaces in your paintings to slick surfaces on prints, on perspex.
Yeah, they've fed.
It seems like a natural evolution.
Yeah, it was. It was kind of like the choice of the black perspex was, you know, it just seemed like it was. For one thing, it was so perfect. It was so slick, and it was two things. It was all depth or all surface, depending on the reflectivity and where the viewer was standing. And I liked that idea, and I just felt like I could put layers of ink and imagery over that to sort of use that tension of surface and depth with that particular material. And I was also sort of interested in using an actual building material. You know, so it's like, you know, perspex, you know, or plexiglass or whatever you want to call it, is used in a lot of, you know, in a lot of buildings, in a lot of architectural structures. Yeah.
And it's the aesthetic of seamless flatness. Where do you think you get that from? I mean, there's a lot of that around in Melbourne, I think.
You think
Melbourne
so?
painting.
You think it's
there's a bit of that around?
Yeah.
I mean, there's that old theory that we get it from magazines because we don't get to see the real paintings on the other side of the world. But it's more than that, isn't it?
It is more than that. I think that's the early postmodernist take on why there's a sort of slickness or a particular sort of surface that's happening in Melbourne. But it's like, I think we're well beyond that. And I think where that sort of slick, homogeneous surface sort of started being introduced to my work, in my work, was the influence of digital technology and of screens, and the impact that has on your vision and your way of sort of seeing the world and sort of conceiving of visual ideas. You know, I think like around 1998, 1997, you know, I started becoming interested in those ideas and its relationship to painting and how it's affecting painting.
Well, that's kind of the time of screens proliferating in our existence. That was when we started having more than one screen in our houses.
Yeah.
Really, didn't we?
Yeah, well, you'd have your computer monitor. It's like laptops started becoming.
And it's not just the image on the computer either. It's the housing of the computer and the housing of the TV. All these slick surfaces start to emerge. Yeah,
and everything's framed.
Everything's framed.
You know, and it's like now there's there's iPods and iPhones, there's electronic billboards, light boxes. You know, that sort of proliferation of digital imagery and electronic imagery is, it's like something that's like, I just think that it's just subconsciously impacted on art making practice in general. But around that time back, around the mid-90s, it was definitely a consideration. It was something that I did want to introduce into my work, and I think that now it's become embedded in it, kind of almost like second nature. It's just like it's part of what I do. It's not necessarily a conscious thing anymore. It's like that idea of the screen and the relationship of painting to digital technology or whatever is not something that's overtly important or of interest to me anymore.
The other thing I was going to ask you about is, I was just thinking about your work over the last few years and how one of the strongest architectural shifts is from exterior to interior.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And have you constructed these interior spaces from shots that you've taken, or is this a confection of?
No, it's a confection.
Things you've seen?
Yeah, it's sort of like partly imagined. Some are sort of collaged from magazines or things online. I don't think I have done an interior based on my own photos.
Perhaps you're not getting into these high-rise penthouses enough.
Yeah, I'm moving in the wrong circles.
But I can easily see that kind of exploration continuing throughout the interior kind of thing. I mean, I think it's becoming. You're showing more of a world. You've given us this world of buildings, and we're getting this sense of this kind of Darren Wardle metropolitan urban world. And now you're taking us into the interiors.
Well,
you can kind of see that going into all aspects of interiors. I mean, not just these living space kind of things, but down corridors and into bathrooms or something.
Yeah. Well, it's like the interior is, it's one of the great genres of painting. It's like it's
a human space, so it's easy to project yourself into.
But it's also a more overtly psychological space, and I think it always has been through art history. There's a generosity there in that it is intimate, and there is this psychological dimension, like another interior overlaid on the idea of the interior.
Sure.
So it's a metaphor for our inner lives.
Yeah, sure. You can think of Vermeer
as
a perfect example of that, and Edward Hopper is another one. In those ones, you always kind of feel like you're just outside the room, looking in at the action.
Yeah, well, there's something incredibly voyeuristic about Hopper's work.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure that I don't think that my interiors have that sort of overt.
It's not voyeuristic.
Voyeurism,
but it's like a conflation of that with, say, the device that someone like Caspar David Friedrich used in his landscapes, which were big, open landscapes, and he would have a staff. Say early on in the painting, there'd be a stick poking out of the ground.
Yeah,
and you kind of psychologically identify with that staff, and that becomes the surrogate you.
Yes, of course, that's you're metaphorically grabbing hold of that.
Absolutely, and this chair, perhaps the way its back is to us, is the chair that we would be sitting in.
Yeah.
In a similar way.
Yeah, I kind of like as I started sort of, as that painting started evolving, I realised that was, that was going to be it. That was the hot seat. Yeah. That's the hot seat, but it's got its back to us. So, I mean, that's an interesting analogy with the Friedrich, But, I think I did my first interior about 5 years ago, and I've kind of done one kind of every year since, so... But I did want them to supplement all of the exterior sort of architectural work that I'd been doing for a long, long time. But it's gradually honed down. Like years ago, I started out doing these like huge expanses of suburbia. Sort of like housing estates out in Templestowe and in areas where the Heidelberg School used to paint. Which had been colonised by, sort of A.V. Jennings style developments. And so it was like this big wide view. It was like from the landscape genre, but, instead of seeing the moon rising over the Dandenongs, you just see these rows of, houses. And then, sort of that gracefully honed down to more sort of, attention on sort of aberrations, architectural aberrations in the suburban environment, things that sort of stood out from all of that homogeneity.
So you see this evolution as like a zooming in.
In a way, yeah.
Like the start of Psycho, which starts with the view of the city and it gets closer and closer and then goes through a window into an interior.
Yeah, well, maybe eventually I will end up in the bathroom with a view over the sink or something,
Yeah, I can see some swirly colours going down the plug hole.